Champion's not dead, he is alive. Oh, and he already knows my every need. Surely he will come and rescue me. God of miracles, come. We need your supernatural love to break through. Nothing's impossible. You're the God of miracles.
When you are in a fight, it is always good to know the weakness of the enemy. In fact, that's how you win a fight. A lot of you are in a fight. You've been in a fight. Some with each other, okay. Some with the enemy. And early this morning, as I felt like somebody had punched me, I laid there and I thought, now when I get up, I don't want to fall down again, so I shall very strategically hit where it counts, the enemy. And I'm still standing. When I was a kid, the old fighter, Max Baer, came to live with us. You may have known him of the story that they made a movie about him with James Braddock, who was the great fighter, the bulldog of Bergen. Well, it's a true story. James Braddock, all the odds were against him. He would win this fight, and he would later on become a bridge builder and a heavy equipment operator. He was a good man, and he raised good kids. He believed in the Lord. But he was a fighter, and he was in a fight that he could not win. Max Baer killed people in the ring. That's what he did. He was a mean, rotten man. And everyone told James Braddock, you shouldn't fight him. He's going to kill you. And you're good, but let's face it, you're not that good. You got these kids, this little wife, he's going to kill you. Well, it was the Depression, and he needed the money, so he fought. He fought with broken hands, is what he did, more than once. And he would wait for hours through the night, with his hands taped up, with gloves covering them, so that no one would see he had broken hands, so that they would hire him, so that he could get a day's wage to put food on the table. Because he had had to send his kids away before, because they had no heat and they had no milk. And he swore it wouldn't happen again. And he'd wait in these long lines just to be chosen to lift bricks and haul concrete, something a man needs his hands for. The Lord would be with him, and sometimes he would be chosen and sometimes not. But I tell you this story because he showed up in great pain, taped up, bandaged up, busted up, and he showed up. And you, even though you're taped up, torn up, broke up, busted up, it's to your credit that you show up. James Braddock would go on and fight Max Baer, but not until he had locked himself in a room with footage, just film, of how Max Baer killed people. How did he do that in the ring? And how could it be that he could avoid his imminent death? So he began to watch, and he began to watch, began to know his enemy. And then he realized, when he gets you on the ropes, that's when you're done. I can't let him get me on the ropes. That's when he'll kill me. So James Braddock, torn up, clearly the lesser physically fit. He was beat up from working all night, lifting 100 pounds of concrete and a variety of things, hauling it on ships. Max Baer spent the night with somebody rubbing his feet. James Braddock spent the night rubbing the feet of his children. Torn up, busted up, taped up, but he showed up. And in that fight, he knew if he let the enemy, which was Max Baer, and I met the man, and I'm letting you know, yeah, he was the enemy. Get him, listen to me, get him in a position where he did not belong, it would kill him. This year, when you go forward, do not let the enemy get you in a position where he can kill you. You're a fighter. The ropes are not bad always. They can be used to your advantage. All that is gold is not necessarily good. I remember when I was very overwhelmed with doing so many things about 15 years ago. And it was the middle of the night, and I feel like I created the 20-hour workday somehow. And I was in the middle of a collapse, and I said, Lord, I feel like I'm holding on to the horns of the altar, and it's sanctuary to me. But is there no relief? You have brought this one and that one, and dear God, is there no relief? You have given me so much, and I'm one person, and I'm sick, and there's no sleep, and there's no rest, and there's need all around me. And I've got the horns of the altar, and I can't even fight the enemy anymore. The Lord did not come to me compassionately, smoothly. He was not Captain Stubing that day. He came to me and said, if you're that out of sorts, it's because you're doing too much and you're doing some of the wrong things. It was all good. It was all godly. It was right. It was stuff I was called to do. But I was approaching it incorrectly, and it was going to kill me. Even in doing good, I allowed the enemy to throw me on the ropes. And the death blow was coming, and I could feel it. I could almost see it. And that day, God said, don't let yourself get in this situation again. And he explained to me how to manage my life and my time according to the ministry he had put in front of me. And I have never had that trouble again. Some of you this year are going to have to reevaluate what you're doing and how you're doing it. And in the fight, so many years ago, sure enough, Max Baer hits him down, and he's coming in for the kill. And I mean, he was coming in to kill him. And James Braddock would later say that out of the corner of his eye, he was just waiting for that right moment where there was an opening, where there was a weakness. And when he saw that weakness, he went forward with all the power that he had. And he won the title. And it's a grand story. Years would go by. Puts me at about, 10 years old. My father and his brother, my uncle, knew many people, some savory, some unsavory. Max Baer was one of the unsavory people. And he came to our house, broke. He had no money. He had nothing. His ears were swollen out. They call them cauliflower ears, I guess, from fighting wrong too much. His face was misshapen, and he was an old, angry man. He was a madman. Well, in my house growing up, we had little hutches, outside, like the converted chicken coop and the barn and things like that. My dad would put sheetrock on it, and us kids would live in those. And, he'd bring people in that needed help, pick them up off the streets, and they'd go into the house. Well, there's no heat in those little hutches. There's no rug. There was grandma's quilt. My brother tried an electric blanket one time. He snuck it out there and caught the place on fire, his side. So, the wiring was a miracle, I guess. So we all lived out there. But there was one thing. My mother got up at 4 a.m. and chopped kindling, and that's why we don't have a fireplace to this day. I'm scared to death that I am going to have to chop kindling. So there's none of that. But she would get up early and chop kindling, and we had a giant stove. It was a wood burner. I had a blower on the bottom, and it would blow hot air. And you have 10, 12 people living in there, and you got one bathroom, and you have a sewage system that doesn't know how to work all the time. So everybody had 10 minutes in the bathroom. You'd get up and you'd form a line. The bathroom's here, and the line is here. There's the heater. And you couldn't get in front of that heater in this old, drafty farmhouse. You couldn't get in front of the heater unless you were in that spot in line, and you had to wait your turn. So here comes Max Baer. He comes in and he says, I'm the champion of the world. He goes to the front of the line. He was a guest, basically, right? Champion of the world. Well, my mother got wind of it, and I still remember her throwing that old dish towel over her shoulder, and she came out and she said, I don't care if you're the champion of the world. These are my children, and you get in line, in the back of the line. So he argued with her, and then he got to the back of the line, and he kept trying to nudge his way, and he was just a mean old man is what he was. And my mother said, you're here because you're poor. You're here because you've mismanaged your life. You're here because you need Jesus. That's the only reason anybody comes in here. But not at the expense of my children. You stay in that line or get out. So he went crying for my dad. My dad came in and he said, well, nobody crosses Betty Lou. Whatever she says is what's going to happen. He pushed his way to the front of the line again, and all of us kids, we ratted him out. Mom. So Max Baer, champion of the world, king of the world, as he used to love to call himself, got taken out by a bunch of farm kids screaming for their mama. My mother came out and unplugged that man and said, you get out and you get out now. It's a 15-mile walk to a bus. I'm sure you'll find it because you are the champion of the world. Get out, and she meant it and left. Years later, we would watch that movie. And my mother, how many years later it was? Probably 40 years, 30, 40. The veins on her neck begin to bulge. Her cheeks get red, and her hands start to clench, and my father starts to laugh. She began to talk about that man. She was still. If he was around, she would take him on again. The king of the world, champion of the world, meant nothing. I tell you this story because some of you are going to be very tempted to let the enemy put you on the ropes, and some of you are going to put yourself on the ropes. And the enemy is going to take advantage of it if you do that. Do what the Lord has told you to do. We talked about this last week, didn't we? Ahimaz and Cushi, run the race God's given you, not the race somebody else has laid in front of you. Max Baer had a beautiful start, but what a lousy, ridiculous ending. I just thought he was some crazy bum. I would find later on, hey, he really was a champion of the world for a few seconds. I want you to worship this morning as they sing this song, whatever it might be. And we're going to get into the word this morning quickly. I have something I want to show you. But I want you to take a moment, and I want you to examine your life. Maybe you're on the ropes. Maybe you're grabbing the horns of the altar and you're not quite sure if you're going to make it. Maybe you are sacrificing the things of the kingdom, the call of the world. Maybe it doesn't even look bad. Maybe it's not even sin. But if you are not pressing into the Lord like you are supposed to and due to the ministry that He has given you, then you need to look at it, because there'll always be a Max Baer trying to push you around. There's always going to be that guy. There's always going to be that project. There's always going to be that thing. And as you worship for the next few minutes, I want you to examine yourself and ask yourself honestly if there's something you're supposed to step aside from. When we look at our enemy, and I had said before, you need to find his weakness. The weakness of the enemy is our unity and our obedience to the Lord. When we obey the Lord, it's a death blow to him. When we walk in unity, it's a death blow to him. And like we found out from the vision of glory, when we cast down guilt and we refuse to walk in unforgiveness, those are death blows to the enemy, and then you put him on the ropes. No guilt, complete forgiveness, obedience, and unity. Can you do that? Surely you can remember that. Measure your life up against those 4 things in the next 10 minutes, and then we're going to get into the Word. Okay? Thank you. you are in this house and you find yourself in the midst of singleness, I'd like you to come on the line if you're single. Doesn't matter how old you are. If you're in here and you're not married, it means you're single. Daniel, Aubrey, Haley. If you're breathing outside of Owen Kilgore, who's an infant, we won't do that to him. Now, the thing about singleness is sometimes you love it and sometimes you hate it. And when you're very young, you don't really question it. It's what the gig is, it's what you're doing. But you do have thoughts of what it would look like. You do have thoughts as when you get older, what would happen. And the difficulty about singleness is the enemy can get a hold of it anytime you let him and make you despise it and make you hate it and make you want things that aren't for you to have. The enemy can come and cause you to feel despised, cause you to feel rejected and abandoned. And you're so lonely and there's nobody like you and nobody understands you. Well, all that may be true. Nobody understands you. There is nobody like you. For the large group of singles that we have in this church, we do not have a giant singles group. And there's a reason for it. Because I don't want you purposefully connecting with other people that have the same problems that you do. You didn't know I was that smart, did you? Purposefully connecting with people that have the same problem as you do is not brilliant. Familiar spirits roam about, and even as a saint, if you have one wicked thought and you don't pull it down under the cross, that thought will turn into a feeling. How many knows about feelings? They get hurt, they lead you down weird rabbit holes, right? And then the feeling turns into an act. You've learned this. And the act, it starts, turning into a habit. And then a habit becomes a lifestyle. And then, now you've created a destiny for yourself. Simply because you weren't understood. Poor you. Did you forget that God, the creator of the whole world, understands you? Martin and I were youth leaders for 18 years. And, it isn't that it was an exercise in futility. It was not. Great things happen. But every youth group, and without exception, I can say that over 18 years, without exception, every youth group, there are teen pregnancies. There are problems. There's gossiping, there's tale-bearing, bad ideas, bad thoughts, rebellion. And it doesn't come from without like a wolf in the night, like a fox in the hen house. No, it's within the group. Because they're not managed strongly enough, and they teach people how to be cheap and how to be weak and how to be lazy. And then now they've learned how to be cheap and weak and lazy, and so they are cheap and weak and lazy. Are you cheap and weak and lazy? No, you're not. Because you don't have groups. You have Jesus. He's in your group. The world will tell you that you need more than that. The world will tell you it's not snazzy enough. It's not snappy enough. It's not right enough. It's not proper enough. I remember coming back. How old are you, Aubrey? You're 11. I remember when I was about 10 and I was at an adult meeting. It was an adult revival. And I remember I felt the Spirit of the Lord. It was at some big convention. I don't know how I got there, but I was there. And an old woman came walking up this way, and I felt the Spirit of the Lord on her. I didn't know who she was. And I grabbed her. And I remember I held on as if I needed to get something from her. And she grabbed me and she wept. And I can still feel, almost 50 years later, I could still feel her belly shaking up and down against the firmness of her, what they call foundation, the girdle. I guess they don't use those anymore. Maybe we should, but I remember hugging this large woman that felt like she had a slab of concrete on her gut. And I remember thinking, it isn't going to get any better than this. She's given me something. I'm getting something, and I didn't know what it was, and I didn't care. And from that moment on, the kids were weird to me. I didn't like them. They were doing dumb things, saying dumb things, and they were being dumb. I wanted Jesus. He was in my group. Amen? And I still don't have very many people in my group, but I have Jesus in my group, right? The real group of your soul is you and the Lord. It's very important. Now that I've given you the single speech, I want you to lift your hands to the Lord. And I want you to give your singleness, whether you're young or old, I want you to give it to the Lord. I want you to ask Him to prepare the path that's in front of you. This is between you and Jesus. He's in your group. I'm not. Not really. Ask the Lord to prepare the way. Ask Him that, when you get stupid, to let you lay it down and quit being stupid. Not lean on the ideas of men and the rules of society, that your singleness is awesome. Your singleness is a beautiful thing before God because He made you that way for this time. And the day when the Lord would bring you somebody in your group intimately, they'll be right and they'll be perfect because of what you do now.
'Cause your love is so much sweeter than anything I've tasted. I wanna know your heart.